Well, in 1996, some of us, bishops, priests, lay people, met and formed in that summer the American Anglican Council. And the stated purpose of the American Anglican Council was to work to reform the Episcopal Church and/or to provide an alternative for faithful Orthodox Episcopalians. Jim Stanton, Bishop of Dallas, was elected chairman of the executive committee. I was elected vice chairman, and we began our work. Now, this work to reform the church from within did much good work, but the events that followed soon showed clearly that we could not reform the Episcopal Church. In 1997, we were electing a new presiding bishop at the General Convention in Philadelphia, and we put all our efforts behind a man we believed to be Orthodox. And there were two candidates. Bishop Thompson was the one many of us were supporting, and the other was Bishop Griswold. Bishop Griswold won. And Bishop Browning retired as presiding bishop. We had not been successful in gaining control of the House of Bishops. I came back from that meeting, and I speak only here for myself. What I did following that immediately, I was bishop in residence at All Saints Church, Pauley's Island at the time. And John Schuler had been at the convention, and we both reported. And what came from that report there is 4 of us sat in rocking chairs there in the rector's office, was an invitation to the rectors of 30 large parishes across the United States to come to Pauley's Island to gather, to pray, to discuss, and make some decision about what we could do next. It was clear that we could not count on just the bishops to carry the ball. We had to have a whole team. We needed to, particularly immediately, the clergy of the church, but also to enlist the laity as well. They issued a statement on September the 9th. Interestingly enough, that calendar date is the Feast of the Martyrs of Memphis. Also, it's my birthday. And we said that we issued this following statement. Our first promise when we were ordained was to be true to the doctrine, discipline, and worship of Christ as this church has received it from the one holy Catholic and Apostolic Church, the undivided church of the first 5 centuries. And we said, this is where we draw the line in the sand. Hence the name and the birth of the First Promise Movement. In December that year, the RNS Fellowship of Bishops met in Jacksonville. We tried one last chance to get the remnant of the RNS Fellowship to come together and take action. And what we proposed to them, to the active bishops, I think there were 14 active bishops there, and there were 18 of us, Bill, and Fitz, Ben Benitez, and me. And we proposed to them that they bind together and authorize the 4 of us to cross boundaries and to go into apostate dioceses where there were faithful Orthodox people and minister to them. not just in our own name, but in the name of this whole group. We prayed, talked, they would not sign it. Several months earlier in Little Rock, Arkansas, 20 faithful lay people who were attending the cathedral there in Little Rock met the home of Mr. and Mrs. David Young. He's a federal judge. They concluded that they were not being nurtured in the gospel at the cathedral. And they asked the Bishop of Arkansas if they could form a new congregation that would nurture them in the Holy Scriptures and in the historic teaching of the church. The bishop refused to support them. He said, we have enough congregations. Pick one of those we already have. They then contacted the Reverend John Schuler, who was head of the North American Missionary Society, and asked for his assistance in forming an independent congregation. It was named St. Andrews. And they grew from that 20 people in their living room to about 75 people who attended regularly. In January of 1998, they issued a call to the Reverend T.J. Johnston, who was the associate priest at All Saints Pawleys Island, to come to Little Rock and lead this new mission congregation. He met with the Bishop of Arkansas and was told that he did not have the bishop's permission to come in and form this congregation. And that if he did come, he would file charges against him to have him deposed. Bishop Johnston could be there for 60 days. He was not bishop then. Tommy Johnson could be there for 60 days as a priest before the charges would be filed. Well, he did not intend to leave. He and his family had moved there. So we began to wonder, what can we do now to support him? In January of 1998, see, TJ went there early part of January. In January the 29th of 1998, Bishop Alison, Bishop Wantland, and myself, 3 bishops, and John Schuler, had made contact with Archbishop Moses Tay, the primate of Southeastern Asia, and his diocese was in Singapore. He had given a bold witness at a previous meeting of the church in the Southern Hemisphere. It's called the Kuala Lumpur Statement. But there was not enough support to get any kind of action taken. So Archbishop Tay came back to Singapore, and he and the bishops of his province voted themselves to approve this statement, which in essence was a very strong statement supporting the lordship of Jesus, the authority of Holy Scripture, the teachings of the undivided church. Well, when we heard that, we said, let's go to Singapore. We called, asked him, he said he'd be glad to see us. So we flew to Singapore. And I remember we walked in and we sat down in his office, and he said, well, you fellas have come a long way. What can I do for you? And I remember saying to him, well, anybody that will stand up and make a bold statement like you did, supporting the gospel of our Lord Jesus Christ, people will travel halfway around the world to see you. That's why we're here. So we talked with him there and proposed to him really what we had proposed to the other bishops in Jacksonville, and they wouldn't approve. But we proposed to him that he accept us into his province as bishops and then send us back to the United States as missionaries under his authority, one that would protect us from being deposed, but more importantly, it would be a bold witness that missionaries now will come into the United States, and rather than we sending missionaries to them. Well, he said that's a very interesting idea, and but I would have to discuss this with the other bishops before I could answer you. So let's stay in touch. He said, oh, by the way, we're having Lambeth this summer. I doubt that they'll want to do anything before then, but I promise you we'll keep it at the head of the list. And then as we were walking out the door, he said, oh, by the way, how old are you guys? I said, well, I'm 71. Fitz said, I'm 71. And to our surprise, Bill said he was 64. Wow, we didn't realize he was so young. And then Archbishop Tay said, well, fellas, we got a problem there because our bishops have to retire when they're 65 here. So, but let's stay in touch. Well, Fitz and I flew on from Singapore to Oxford, and we went to see Michael Green, a noted evangelist there. And we went to see Chris Sugden and Vinay Samuel, who were leading the Oxford Center for Missionary Studies, to seek their counsel. And then we came back home. Well, the clock was ticking. The 60 days were ticking in Little Rock. We hadn't gotten what we wanted there. We were going to bring TJ under our wing. Thad Barnum was a priest who was based up at All Saints Paul's Island, and he had a good friend named John Rashahana, who was a bishop in Rwanda. And so he said, you know, John Rashahana might help us. So we said, let's get in touch with him. And we proposed that he take T.J. Johnston under his oversight and protect him. He said, I'll have to talk with the Archbishop Kalini. I'll get back to you. The clock is ticking. We were in a meeting in Atlanta, this First Promise group, and this came up. Thad and I went in and we called John Rashahana to say, have you got any word for us? This is right at the first of, it was the end of March, I think, by then. And, or end of February it would have been. And he said, yes, we'll do it. I'll do it. And so within 2 weeks, he had sent letters and simply was transferring a priest from the Episcopal Church, one member of the Anglican Communion, one province, to another province. But there were threats and all after that he would be deposed, and needless to say, the Archbishop of Canterbury was upset, and so were a lot of other people at what we had done. But we then, Bishop Salmon was Bishop of South Carolina then, and so I talked to him, and he said, well, the charges would have to be filed by the Bishop of Arkansas and sent to me. This is where it would have to be at. And he said, I don't think our standing committee, nor I, would be interested in bringing him to trial. We were encouraged by that. And it was at that point that we then did transfer him there. But this started it kicked up a lot of dust in the Anglican Communion. Well, here was this little guy in Rwanda just had been made a bishop about a year before. He was in the most dangerous district in Rwanda. His house had been burned down recently by rebels, and he was willing to take this chance. He was going to Lambeth for the first time. And I said, and he had no staff, no support or anything. And I said, he's going to need some help. Well, I didn't get an invitation to Lambeth because I was retired. But I'd been before, so I just took my purple shirt and went. And I got a motel right near the campus, right near Canterbury, and rented a car. There was a guy named Bill Atwood who was head of Ecclesia. He was over there trying to stir up support, but he was really opposed to what we had done. But we became allies there to try to support John Rashahana. We began to network while we were there. First thing we did, though, was John Rogers, who was dean of Trinity Seminary then, had come to Lambeth a week early, as I had, to be part of a missionary conference there, in which bishops and priests, bishops from all over the Anglican community would be there, and we'd have a chance to talk. And it gave us a chance to meet with Archbishop Kalini and all the bishops of Rwanda and begin to get to know them. And then in the course of the Lambeth Conference, which lasts 3 weeks, we continued that networking. And I remember one day I said, John Rashahana, do you know that there's going to be the Archbishop of Canterbury's call for this to be dealt with tomorrow by Bishop Frank, Presiding Bishop Frank Griswold and Archbishop Kalini. They're going to meet, and that you're to be there, and Bishop Salmon's to be there. And do you know that? Well, yeah, I heard that. I said, have you all ever met each other? He said, no. So I went into, I knew I couldn't go in the front door where they ate. I didn't have a ticket. Hadn't been there before. I went around through the garden, came in the side door. And I went over and sat down by John Rashahana, by Bishop Ed Salmon. I said, Ed, you know about this meeting tomorrow? Yeah, I do. Have you ever met John? No, I haven't. Would you like to? Yeah. Okay, my car's parked out front. Told him what kind it was and where it was. I said, I'll meet you out there later. Then I went across the room and sat down by John Rashahana. And I said, you know about this meeting? Yes. Have you ever met it? No. Would you like to? Yes. My car's out front. Go get in it. So then I go on out the side door, go around there waiting on him, and I'm sitting in the front seat, not to be conspicuous. And Ed gets in one door at the back seat, and John gets in the other, and I said, Ed, meet John. And so they began to talk, and I said, this doesn't seem too good being sitting out here in front of all this. Let's go somewhere. So we drove away, and we went to the garbage dump for privacy. And that's where they talked and met and prepared for the next day. The other thing that came out of that was this. John Rashahana says, I've written a statement about all this, but I don't have any. Could you give me some copies? I said, yeah. How many you need? Well, I need 100 by noon tomorrow. Okay, John, I'll go to work on it. And I didn't know if I found the print shop. And I bring it back to him, and he said, oh, I'm going to need 700 more, so I go back and get that. Then I talked to Ed, and Ed said, You know, I told Frank Griswold about this, and he sent me permission, said he had no problem with it. And I've got a letter. I said, you want copies of that? He said, yes. So back to the print shop. So it was that kind of legwork that we're doing. And then we would get different African and Asian bishops who didn't know each other together, and we'd go out, we'd set up a dinner for them, you know, small groups. And so that was kind of facilitating that we wanted to do there. Following the convention in the Lambeth Conference in 1998, there was several Orthodox bishops from the Episcopal Church met with the archbishops from Asia, Africa, and South America in Singapore and in Uganda to develop a broad plan to provide Orthodox congregations and dioceses in the United States the support they needed to stand firm for the historic faith. So in the year 2000, in January once again, we went back to Singapore. Archbishop Tay had invited us to come. It was Bishop Alison and me from the United States, and we took with us Chuck Murphy from the head of the First Promise Movement, and John Rogers, who was head of a group of independent Anglican congregations. And we took them requesting that they be consecrated bishops. We were met there by Archbishop Kalini and Bishop John Rashahana and David Pitches from England. So there were 6 of us there. We met in the bishop's office there in the cathedral and discussed this. This was a momentous occasion, a significant decision to be considered here. So basically, we let the 2 archbishops they really were talking to each other and we were listening to the others, but they turned to us for our approval when it was over. But they went back and forth about the pros and cons of doing this, the objections that they'd been hearing, the possible consequences. And I remember Archbishop Tay stopped and he turned and looked at Archbishop Kalina. He says, "Emmanuel, I think we ought to do it." And Emmanuel said, "I agree, let's do it." So they looked at us and we said, "We agree, let's do it." So then the next question, well, when will we do it? 6 o'clock this afternoon. One of the reasons was that there were a lot of people gathering in the area who wished to do something to block this, representatives of the Archbishop and others. So we need to get it done, and then deal with the result. So we were in the sacristy putting on our vestments, and this is a story that I'll never forget, this incident. We were putting on our vestments there and were quiet as we prepared to go in for this. I looked over at Moses Tay and I said, you know, Lord, Moses Tay is going to resign in less than a year, as he will have finished his term as Archbishop. But Emmanuel Kalini is just getting started in his. He'll be around for a while. He's really going to catch the flack. And I was sitting over there and I was prayerfully considering how I could approach Emmanuel Kalini to say what was in my heart. So I went over and I said, Emmanuel, I've been standing over here asking the Lord to give me words of appreciation and admiration for what you're doing here. I said, here you are, the Archbishop of the Anglican Church in Rwanda, just dealing with the terrible impact of the genocide. And yet you're willing to help us out? I said, that's awesome. You got enough on your plate without worrying about us. He said, well, Alec, he said, you know, there's only one body of Christ. If it gets infected in one place, it'll soon infect the whole body. So he said, yes, I'm doing it for you, but not just for you. I'm doing it for the rest of the church, but especially for Rwanda. He said, you know, we get internet now, and we get messages pretty fast, news, even over here in Rwanda. He said, our chief opponents here are the Muslims. And when word comes in to them and to us that one of your bishops, Jack Spong, denies every aspect of the Christian faith, and you bishops don't do anything about it, the Muslims then say to us, see there, your own bishops don't believe what you're preaching. He said, that just undercuts us. So we're doing it for us too. Well, we went in, we consecrated the bishops, and we had a wonderful dinner afterwards that Moses Ted arranged in a truly authentic Singapore restaurant this time. And we had about 10 courses, and we were sitting at the table. And on about the 4th course, I made the mistake of saying, and what is this? I finished chewing what I had in my mouth, and I didn't ask any more questions. But it was a wonderful time.